Another guy who is getting a lot of potential trade buzz that isn't on the court right now is Trae Young. Did you know that the Atlanta Hawks are 10-4 this season without Trae Young on the floor? Kind of nuts when you really think about it. It's actually kind of a scary feat because this team is playing really, really well. How well, you may ask? Well, we just talked about the Hornets earlier on about LaMelo Ball. In the most recent win against said Charlotte Hornets, Jalen Johnson, Ayeka Okongwu, Dyson Daniels, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker all scored at least 20 points. And I think the most interesting thing about this season, I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people knew that Jalen Johnson was a beast. I think everybody knew. I think a lot of people, let me not say everybody, but I think a lot of people knew that Jalen Johnson had the upside of being somebody who could be a real all-star at the power forward position if he could just put a full season together of being healthy. But I think the most surprising person for me this season is Nickeil Alexander-Walker. For those who do not know, I was one of the biggest Nickeil Alexander-Walker fans coming out of Virginia Tech. One of my first articles I ever wrote, I was blogging for like a school website back in 2017. And one of the first articles I wrote was about that draft class with Zion and Ja Morant and all of those guys in the mix. Um and I remember, and I mean, even that Michael Porter Jr. class and everything like that, right? And I remember being so high on Nickeil Alexander Walker because I just saw this real two-way ability. He was mainly a scorer in college, but I thought there was real upside there for him to be this like really solid two-way guard at the next level. And when he got to Minnesota, he kind of became this guy who, or excuse me, when he got to New Orleans, because that's where he started out as, there was this real rough patch in the very beginning where it seemed like he couldn't find his fitting, very similar to his teammate now, Dyson Daniels. And then he ends up on the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he carves this role out for himself as a defender, right? Because I don't really count the 30 seconds he spent in Utah, right? We're not counting that. The Minnesota is where we really got to see Nickeil Alexander Walker blossom. And he blossomed in this real solid three-man defense with him, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels. And I was like, yo, he can really defend on the perimeter. You can make him like you can make them this real lockdown defender off the bench, but he still gives you like real promising ball handling. He's a good decision maker. Like there's a lot to like about what he brings to the table as like an all-around point guard. This season, my boy has activated a level that shows that the Minnesota Timberwolves didn't even know what they had in Nickeil Alexander Walker. He's averaging 19.1 points per game, which is second best on the team this season. He's also averaging 3.1 rebounds and 3.6 assists, but more impressively, shooting 46.4% from the field, 35% while taking the most amount of threes of anybody on the team with 6.4 attempts per game. And he is also shooting 85% from the free throw line with 4.5 free throw attempts per game. For context, 4.5 is by far the highest rate he has gotten to the free throw line in his career. The next highest, you may ask, 1.7 in his last season where he spent with the New Orleans Pelicans into that first stretch with the Utah Jazz. In terms of full seasons with one team, the highest he's ever had was 1.4 free throw attempts per game. That was last season. 1.4 all the way up to 4.5. The man's highest points average in a full season was 12.8. He is at nine. That was in his third year in the league. He is averaging 19.1 points per game after averaging only 9.4 last year. What I'm saying is a lot of people are having conversations about most improved player in the league this year. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker's name is not coming up enough. And I know he's not going to win it. I know he's not going to win it. But his name is not coming up enough when you talk about guys that are taking a major leap. Ryan Rollins is coming up. Denny Avdia is coming up. There's some names that are deservedly in the mix. Jalen Duren is coming up. There's some guys who are deservedly in this mix to make a run at it. But as a guy who is supposed to be a sixth man for this team, they found a real way to position themselves to really get the most out of him starting without Trae Young. With that being said, again, look at the ball handling that this team has on the roster. Jalen Johnson, point forward. Dyson Daniels has real ball handling chops. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has real ball handling chops. Zachary Risachet, I think, is really kind of coming into his own in year two. I think he adds something to the table. Vic Krejci has been a sneaky offensive producer so far this season. 50% from beyond the arc on almost 6 attempts per game? What? 50% from beyond the arc? For context, him and Luke Kennard are both shooting the absolute skin off the ball while averaging a combined near 10 three-point attempts per game off the bench, and both shooting north of 40% from beyond the arc in the process. Like, this team has floor spacing, defensive versatility. They found what I think they've been aware of the entire time, but just did not have the true avenue for it to all play out, in Onyeka Okongwu being a true starting center for them. I don't care if Kristaps Porzingis gets healthy. Onyeka Okongwu deserves to play real significant minutes for this team. I think he needs to start over Kristaps, or I think they have to think about playing more of a jumbo lineup where he plays next to Kristaps a lot more. But Onyeka Okongwu deserves to start at center for them, and I don't think that Kristaps Porzingis should be the one that takes it away from him. Just like I think we kind of came to the conclusion that Clint Capella didn't deserve it, to be quite frank. So that puts the question back on Trae Young of, you're going into a situation where the team already entered the season saying that they don't want to have contract extension conversations right now. You're somebody that if things don't get figured out soon, you'll be an unrestricted free agent by as soon as, I believe, next summer. The team is finding success doing it a different way. What kind of success, you may ask? Let me spell it out for you. They're top 10 in blocks per game. They're top 5 in steals per game. They're top 5 in assists per game. They're top 10 in three-point percentage per game. Now, for those who are wondering, just so you can see the difference, they were top 5 in steals per game, and they were top 5 in assists per game last year. They were middle of the pack as the three-point shooting team, if not worse than middle of the pack as the three-point shooting team. And this is a team that led the league, was bottom 5 as far as turnovers, which in this sense is they turned the ball over the 4th most of anybody in the league. This season, they're ranked 13th. So they're taking care of the ball much better while playing better defense, still moving the ball around at a high rate, and their team is getting really, really good, efficient three-point looks, which is making their team three-point percentage reflect a lot better. If you move Trae Young, who do you get? What archetype of player do you get? Do you get a point guard that just requires a little less usage, and can be a little bit more of a true distributor? Do you get somebody that brings a little bit more of an athletic profile, a la like maybe a Ja Morant type, that has more of an athletic profile that gives you some more downhill scoring ability? Do you go after somebody who could be more of a true back to the basket powered forward? Who would that be? That's an interesting question in its own right, because that archetype has its ebbs and flows in terms of how it translates, especially for a team that this season is top 10 in pace. So even if you are the Atlanta Hawks, who could think of a potential avenue where Trae Young is not in your long term plans, what do you trade Trae Young for? Like, it's so easy to make the idea of moving off of Trae Young to become less expensive at one position and maybe free up long term cap space or position yourself to get more bites of the apple at building through the draft, since they've been relatively successful at developing talent in house. Sure. The other side of it is, are you really gonna trade a guy who is still in his, I guess you could say, quote unquote, athletic prime slash youthful time at age 27, who for his career averages 25, 9.8 assists, and for his career shoots 35% from the arc, from beyond the arc, excuse me. If you're the Atlanta Hawks with no real idea of what you would even be trading for, because let's be honest, unless you're able to get like Giannis, which we know is completely unrealistic because Trae Young's trade value is not worth that much, even if Giannis were to ask out, and Giannis would have to ask out and say, Atlanta's the only place I want to go to bring the trade value down low enough where you could trade Trae Young and maybe one more or two more assets and get Giannis out of the Kubo. Let's be honest, right? So unless you're getting someone like that, who within the top 15, let's say even within the top 20, should the Atlanta Hawks want to trade for that they think would actually bring true upside to this team, that really puts them over the edge in ways that Trae Young, when healthy, doesn't already do? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I don't think there is anybody. I think Ja Morant's maybe the closest thing to it. But I think you have to ask yourself, yeah, he probably fits the pace of play aspect of it. But his declining numbers as a rim finisher makes you wonder, without that, he's not a high level 3-point shooter. He's somebody that can get to the free throw line at a pretty high clip, definitely gets to the free throw line at a pretty decent rate. But Trae Young gets to the free throw line nearly 8 times a game. So he has that factor in while also bringing a floor spacing element. He averages nearly double-digit assists just like Ja Morant's capable of. So it's more of a lateral move, with the only thing changing is the fact that Ja Morant is already under a long-term contract as opposed to Trae Young. You're going to have to consider signing another 5-year extensive deal that pushes him into his age 33 season. And yes, that's a good enough reason to consider moving him. But again, if the value doesn't really match what the risk reward really is stating, which is that Trae Young is still a floor raiser for any team, why is the Atlanta Hawks would you trade him when he's not disgruntled? It sounds like he wants to be here. And the first real version of this team that you've built that feels like it actually is built to complement his skill sets and also work around his biggest flaws. Now you would move off of him when things are as peak as they get from a roster construction standpoint? It really, really doesn't make any sense. So I think the best way to put it is that there isn't really a trade partner out there, I think, right now that makes the most sense for the Atlanta Hawks to be willing to trade Trae Young. I think it would be stupid. I think it would be stupid. I think it'd be silly, and I think it'd be a waste of time. I think it would be a move that Atlanta makes for the sake of saying that they made a move that allowed them to not be binded to the Trae Young experience long term. And the reality of the situation is I don't think being bonded to Trae Young long term really hurts them in any real way. I don't think that having Trae Young as the cornerstone of your franchise, when you also have guys like Zachary Ricochet, you have guys like Jalen Johnson, Nikhil Alexander Walker, Dyson Daniels. You have the New Orleans Pelicans pick this season, which could potentially land you a Cameron Boozer that you can put at your 4 spot, or an AJ DeBonsa that you can have start at the 3-4 spot next to Jalen Johnson, next to Ayeka Okongwu, and you have this crazy jumbo lineup. Maybe Zachary Ricochet ends up coming off the bench as a wing shooter for you. Imagine a backcourt where now you're able to add like a Darren Peterson, and now you have a backcourt that has Darren Peterson, Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, and Nikhil Alexander Walker. What? Like this is a situation where the rich only get richer because of that fleece job you guys pulled off as the Atlanta Hawks this summer over the New Orleans Pelicans, where now you have the chance to get a top 10 pick to add to this team to make them even more talented around Trae Young. Now, if you land Darren Peterson and you feel like that's the easiest avenue to say, you know what, we've got a cost-controlled guy at the point guard position with a lot of upside. They're comparing him to some of the best guards we've seen in NBA history. We don't need Trae Young anymore. I guess financially, fiscally, it would be the most responsible thing to do if you get Darren Peterson and you already have Dyson Daniels and Nikhil Alexander Walker playing really good basketball, to maybe consider just leaning into that as opposed to giving a lucrative contract to Trae Young. Or maybe you just have one of the deepest backcourts in the NBA. In a version of this league where depth is almost as important as control over your cap sheet. Your ability to be deep at all 5 positions in some respects, whether that's positional versatility that allows you to take guys that usually play the 2 and they can also play the 1, or guys that play the 3 that can also play the 2 or the 4. Positional versatility or just full-blown roster construction allows you to have real depth at each position, has been defined as a true character trait needed to build a championship team. We've seen that over the last 2 to 3 years now, that having depth is almost as important as having top-heavy talent. It's almost as important as having a blank check ready for a high-level all-star. So what's wrong with having Trae Young on a max contract while also having Dyson Daniels and Nikhil Alexander Walker on absolute steals of contracts right now? What's wrong with a backcourt that maybe ends up bringing in like a Darren Peterson to add to that group, or a front court where you can add AJ DeBonsa or Cameron Boozer to a front court that already has Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu? What's wrong with that? The idea past this season probably isn't to bring back a guy like Kristaps Porzingis anyway. So a front court room that the headliner for it is Jalen Johnson, Cameron Boozer, or AJ DeBonsa and Onyeka Okongwu? Who's scoffing at that? No one should be. The Atlanta Hawks are in a really solid position with or without Trae Young, but I think the upside for them, true championship caliber, the Atlanta Hawks are in a really solid position right now. But I also believe that even with their success without Trae Young, their true championship caliber selves are unlocked with him on the floor, with these guys producing the way they are, but having the star power of someone like Trae Young, that when it's a game 7 with everything on the line and it's 2 minutes left in the game and you need possessions to end on offense with a bucket, that you can lean on someone like Trae Young to take you home. Because although I love Jalen Johnson and I love Nikhil Alexander Walker and I love Dyson Daniels, Trae Young still gives you an element that all 3 of those guys don't give you. And it's an it factor that, can't be truly quantified. And I know that's very cliche, and I know that's a weird way to summarize it all. But the reality of the situation is that Trae Young is somebody that I believe is a floor raiser for this team. I believe that also with the right roster construction, a la what they have right now, that Trae Young can also be a ceiling raiser for this team, where maybe they're a playoff team without him. Maybe the way they're playing right now, they're a playoff caliber team that's somewhere between the 6th and the 8th seed without him. But in the postseason, they're a first round matchup nobody wants to see if you add Trae Young to what they already have. So I don't think the Atlanta Hawks should trade Trae Young. I think they should just continue to build around him the way they've been doing a great job of doing over the last 2 seasons. Because the last 2 seasons, they've made really good strides to make a team that really fits around Trae Young. Now they just need to lean into it.